The morning frost clung to the window panes like a thin veil of silver. The fire in the hearth had gone out hours ago, leaving the air heavy with the scent of cold ash and ink. Francis Bacon sat hunched over his desk, wrapped in a threadbare robe, his thinning grey hair brushed behind his ears as he reread a page he could no longer care to finish. The stillness was absolute until 3 deliberate knocks broke through it. Bacon looked up, the quill pausing mid-air. Few came this far unannounced. He stood, bones creaking with age, and crossed the small study to the door. When he opened it, a blast of winter air swept in along with a man cloaked in dust. The visitor bowed slightly and extended a sealed letter, its wax marked with a royal crest dulled by travel. "His Majesty requests that you read this in private," the courier said softly. "I was told not to wait for an answer." The words lingered between them like the fog that clung to the fields outside. Bacon took the letter and nodded once. When he looked up again, the courier was already fading into the mist. He closed the door and turned the letter over in his hand, examining the seal. The wax had been cracked and pressed again, twice handled, twice hidden. He returned to the desk where a single candle burned low, its flame trembling as if it too feared what lay inside. He broke the seal. The parchment was thick, the handwriting deliberate and precise. He recognized the hand at once, measured, careful, too formal to betray emotion. "Lord Verulam," it read. "The season grows uncertain, and counsel must travel without heralds or ceremony. Expect me in the dusk of the 3rd night, when the frost gives no sound. Speak of this to no one. C.R." Bacon's eyes lingered on the initials. The candlelight danced across the ink. "Even shadows write in code," he murmured. He folded the letter neatly and slid it beneath a worn manuscript labeled Nova Atlantis. Then he sat back, staring through the frosted glass, the pale morning light catching the worry in his features. Outside, the wind sighed against the cottage walls. Inside, the last ember in the hearth cracked softly and glowed. The summons had come. Midnight lay heavy over Hertfordshire. Frost silvered the fields, and the wind rolled softly against the old stones of Gorhambury House. No heralds announced the visitor. No guard rode before his carriage. Only a single attendant held the reins at the gate as King Charles I stepped down, cloaked and unmarked by royal crest. He walked alone up the gravel path toward the faint glow of a candle in a window. Inside, Francis Bacon sat in his study, robe drawn close, eyes reflecting the flame that refused to die. When the door opened, he rose slowly, surprise giving way to recognition. "Your Majesty," he said quietly. Charles lowered his hood, his breath visible in the cold air. "Forgive my intrusion, Lord Verulam. I could not risk a visit by daylight." "You come as man or monarch?" Bacon asked. "As both," said the king, "but chiefly as a man in need of counsel." Bacon gestured toward the fire. "Then you are welcome. Midnight has always favored truth over ceremony." The king stepped closer, his face drawn and pale beneath the flicker of the flames. "They call you traitor, yet I have never heard a soul doubt your mind." "Titles are given easily when fear holds the pen," Bacon replied. "I served faithfully, and faith made me dangerous." Charles's gaze fell to the embers. "Then serve me now. England is restless. Parliament tears at the crown as if it were cloth. I need a guide who can show me how to rule men who no longer believe in rule." Bacon studied him. "You ask for philosophy, sire. What you need is endurance." "Then write it for me," the king said. "A manual for kingship, truth unsoftened by flattery. I will pay you as my father once did, a full year's salary at the rate of Lord Chancellor, quietly, without record." Bacon shook his head. "I refuse coin, but not purpose. If I am to serve again, grant me something worth the exile it will cost." What exile? Charles asked. A charter, Bacon said. Passage to Virginia and supplies enough to live as a scholar in the New World. Let England believe me dead. Let the colonies think me reborn. In solitude I can write freely what a man cannot say among courtiers. Charles hesitated. You would vanish. I would begin again, Bacon said simply, as a ghost loyal only to the truth. The king turned toward the window, frost glimmering on the glass. Then you will have it. A sealed charter, loyal sailors to see you there and bring the ship home quietly. You will have paper, ink, tools, and food enough to establish residency. It shall appear as aid to Jamestown, nothing more. Bacon bowed slightly. You offer me more than life, sire. You offer me a second creation. Charles's voice softened. Listen, while I do want to pay you back for your years of loyalty that your wisdom represents, a tool I cannot disregard, I will make this happen, my lord. But I will write you for occupational consultation beyond the manual. Of course, your majesty, whatever your desire. Charles's gaze dropped to the fire. Perhaps England will breathe easier believing you dead, he said, but their king will know better. When your majesty receives my book, Bacon replied, it will not flatter you, but it will save you if you let it. Charles looked at him, the shadow of doubt flickering behind conviction. And if I do not? Bacon's eyes turned toward the glowing coals. Then England will have a civil war, and the mob will eat you alive, my king. For a long moment, neither spoke. The fire hissed softly in its grate as if warning them both. Then Charles straightened, drawing his cloak closed. Then we are agreed, he said. Have the text ready in 14 days. He extended his hand. Your death shall be our secret, and your voyage my penance. Bacon clasped it firmly, and may both lead to England's redemption. The king turned, his cloak whispering against the stone. At the door he paused. The light caught the small embroidered rose and cross at his collar. Then he vanished into the night, his attendant waiting unseen among the frost-dark trees. Bacon stood in the silence he left behind, tears gathering despite himself. He whispered to the dying fire, so ends the age of kings, and begins the exile of reason. The candle burns low as Bacon writes through the night. Ink stains his fingers, his quill trembling between exhaustion and revelation. Each page reads like scripture written by reason. Fragments of governance, restraint, and the ethics of power. He does not write for a king alone, but for what might come after kings. Outside, frost creeps along the windows, and dawn glows faintly. Bacon seals each completed page with wax, marking them with a symbol, a rose within a compass. It is not the mark of the crown, but of his own rebirth. For 14 days, Bacon worked as though time itself had grown merciful and still. The cottage remained unvisited, the frost thickening over its windows like cataracts. He rose before dawn, writing until his hands cramped and the candles guttered into pale ghosts of their former flame. When exhaustion came, he welcomed it, the closest thing to peace left in a world where thought was treason. The manual took shape not as doctrine but as dialogue, a conversation between the conscience of power and the weakness of men. The state, he wrote, is not sustained by obedience, but by the illusion of harmony. When the illusion breaks, it is not rebellion that follows, but correction. He paused, quill suspended midair. Correction, he repeated softly, as if testing the word for bitterness. On another page he wrote, Kings rule best who rule least and govern most through example. The scepter may command the body, but only reason commands the soul. He sealed the sheet with red wax and pressed the rose compass into its surface. It belonged to secrecy or to any order of men. It belonged to endurance. By the seventh night, the manual had swollen beyond its original intent. It was no longer simply instruction for a monarch, but an inheritance for civilization itself. If the world must lose its kings, he thought, let it not lose its architects. Bacon set down his quill, rubbed his eyes, and whispered to no one, "May the mind outlive the crown." English coast, 3 weeks later. Dawn broke pale and soundless over the grey waters. The tide rose with the weight of farewell, soft waves striking the hull of a waiting ship. Francis Bacon stood upon the pier, wrapped in a dark wool cloak, his long grey hair restless in the wind. Behind the lenses of his round spectacles, his eyes reflected both fatigue and calm certainty. A lone figure approached through the fog. The king's courier, dressed in black velvet, bearing a sealed chest bound with iron clasps. "His Majesty sends this by his own hand," the courier said, bowing. "Your passage and provisions are in order. You sail under the guise of a trade envoy bound for Jamestown. None but I know the truth." Bacon nodded. "And the manuscript?" The courier opened the chest just enough for Bacon to see the bound leather volume within, sealed with red wax, its rose compass imprint deep and unbroken. "It will be delivered to His Majesty before nightfall," the man said quietly. Bacon looked out to sea, the horizon veiled in mist. "Tell your king," he said slowly, "that the council within is not meant to preserve his reign, but his soul. If he mistakes one for the other, England will not see another century unscarred." The courier hesitated. "You truly believe war will come?" Bacon's breath fogged in the cold. "It has already begun. Only the banners remain invisible." He turned to the ship, its sails stirring against the morning light. Sailors moved about in silence, stowing crates marked with the royal crest now shrouded beneath plain canvas. The smell of salt and oak filled the air. Bacon placed a hand upon the rail and paused, looking once more toward the cliffs fading behind the fog. "All that is ordered decays," he said softly, "but from the ruins of pride may reason build again." The courier bowed deeply. "Shall I tell them you are dead, my lord?" Bacon smiled faintly. "Tell them I am thinking." He ascended the gangway, boots echoing upon the wet wood. As the ship pulled away, the mist swallowed it whole, leaving only the faint cry of gulls and the rhythm of waves against stone. The courier stood alone at the pier, the sealed manuscript heavy in his hands. He traced the wax seal with his thumb, then looked eastward where the sun burned faintly through the fog. "May God keep you, philosopher," he whispered, "and may your king learn what you already knew." The wind rose. The ship was gone, and with it the last great mind of England.